Lovers of lore, thank you for joining me for the 6th installment of the March of the Machine Magic the Gathering story. We have this part of the story starting out on Ikoria with a group of survivors of the Phyrexian onslaught. Now they're led by General Jarina Kudro. They had managed to escape their home city of Dranith when it was attacked, and now they were headed to Lavabrink. Hopefully the walls there will be thick and strong enough to protect them. Now there is some dissension in the ranks. Colonel Bird basically is disagreeing with Jarina's overall approach. He says that they're going to reach the settlement of Lavabrink by nightfall, but he wants to send a detachment of soldiers ahead to Lavabrink, and the injured and sick are slowing the group down, where Jarina responds saying that the fighters are actually needed to fend off an attack if it happens, and Brid counters by saying, "There'll be no fight if that abomination reaches us. We can't win. Your trust in Vivian is misplaced." But Jarina ends up dismissing him in annoyance. And then we leave the group of refugees, and the story switches over to Vivian. So, she is with a squad of dangerous survivors. They're used to hunting the largest of Ikoria's prey, and Ikoria is a land of mutation where behemoths can get bigger out of nowhere. So, they are all festooned with tons of different bottles of poisons, and all of their weapons have at least 3 different types of poison applied to each and every blade. They are led by the master hunter, Cheval. Now, it's an uneasy alliance between this group and Vivian because Vivian's not really cool with the hunting that they do overall, but considering they're both facing the threat of Luca, they've gathered together. So, we find them facing off against a 30-ton Vantasaur when it's unceremoniously yanked backwards and subsumed by a gigantic flesh titan. Luca is lumbering towards Lavabrink and Jarina and all those survivors. That's the abomination that Brid was talking about. Now you have to understand, Luca isn't how we last saw him. When we saw him on Phyrexia, he was just a regular individual who had been completed. Now he is a massive being of flesh. He is in the center, and he has gigantic arms and legs made out of the absorbed flesh of all kinds of different beasts and monsters of Ikoria. The Vantasaur, 30 tons of it, made up only a small portion of Luca's leg. So he is a towering monstrosity of Phyrexian flesh. And this Luca thing lumbers into these traps that were set up by these beast hunters, and he barely even notices any of them. But he's plodding forward with his giant lumbering legs, and they start to smash through the brittle surface of the part of Ikoria they're in. Now, this is Rogrin, so the geography there is nutty. Not far below the surface is a ton of lava. So Luca's legs just jam down into this lava. It's bubbling up with magma, and his legs are catching on fire. The smell was absolutely disgusting. So Cheval mobilizes his men, seeing that Luca, at least for the moment, is somewhat trapped in the ground. They start to fire volleys of poisoned arrows, and some of the arrows, when they come close to the lava, the poison that's on the arrow tips, they blaze in bright different colors. So they hurl dozens and dozens of barbed spears at Luca as well. These spears embed in Luca's flesh, and the monster hunters quickly pound stakes onto the ropes to try and anchor Luca down. Now, the monster hunters were practiced at it, so it took very little time for them to accomplish their goal. And then Vivian fires an arrow of pure green mana directly for Luca's face, but he just caused a bone spur to jut up out of his body and shield him. After that, the flesh titan half crouched forward, blocking Luca from view. It then reared and strained against the ropes that were anchoring it, pulling them loose. A few of the braver and more foolhardy monster hunters tried to hold on to the ropes. They were pulled off the ground and horrifically absorbed by the Titan. Their screams cut off as they were consumed. This broke the morale of the remaining monster hunters. They fled in an absolute panic. Vivian stood her ground and fired a spirit arrow that manifested into a gigantic spirit version of a colossal dreadmaw. The gigantic dinosaur spirit crashes into Luca, and it's tearing chunks off of his flesh. Now, the Luca Titan is trying to absorb the dreadmaw, not really sure what it's dealing with, but once Luca realizes he can't pull the dreadmaw into his own form, he pulls both of his gigantic behemoth arms up and brings them down in a massive slam that causes the dreadmaw to blow apart. The Luca Titan then pulls itself up out of the ground and starts towards Lava Brink again. Vivian fired her bow up in the air. It was a warning to Jarina of failure. Luca was coming for them. When Jarina saw the warning sign, she changed the intended route of the travelers and took them to a deep basin with no exit. When they arrived there, the people started to panic. Things got worse as Luca had just arrived, crawling over one side of the basin. Masses of people turned to flee, screaming. "Quiet!" bellowed 1,000 voices. Luca had formed countless mouths all over his body. They spoke again. "I forgive you for turning against me. I bring you the gift of Phyrexia." But he was interrupted by a massive cry. A giant dragon, Vadrock, who called this basin home, had returned and was indignant at the intruders. Luca met Vadrock's challenge, and Vadrock was doing well at first, dodging and tearing into Luca, but then Luca split his monstrous flesh arms open to launch countless tendrils that wrapped around Vadrock and started to pull him in. And Luca actually started to consume Vadrock, but this urged Vadrock on to struggle more valiantly, and Vadrock roared and released blue flames, flames that didn't burn. They erased things from existence. The many mouths of Luca cried out as half of his arm was erased from existence. And Vadrock continued, unrelenting, burning the Titan away. And then Vadrock reached its jaws into the Titan's center, wrenching Luca free. The Titan collapsed as Luca was pulled from its body. And then Vadrock spit Luca's lifeless corpse down the slope of the basin. Things looked really dire for Jarina and her people when Vadrock turned to obliterate them as well. But Vivian interceded and begged the dragon not to do it. Vadrock sensed something in Vivian that he approved of. It might have been tied to the arc bow, and so he flew off unconcerned. Jarina, however, had the problem that her people were enraged that she had led them to Vadrock's lair. They were also very, very unhappy about being used as bait to lure Luca there. The conversation surrounding their discontent was put on hold as a Phyrexian portal opened in the sky and part of Realmbreaker reached through. Phyrexia wouldn't wait for them while they stood around bickering. All right, my friends, that ends this installment of the March of the Machine story. I hope that you enjoyed it. Come on back tomorrow for the next installment. In the meantime, go and enjoy some more magic lore. There are a whole bunch of different stories on this channel going all the way back to the beginning of magic's history. If you like what we're doing here, you can support the channel by joining the channel membership or by joining our Patreon. Big thank you to the channel's members and patrons. Thanks for coming by, everybody. And remember, lore is life.